a small island stood defiantly against one of history's greatest military geniuses, Napoleon Bonaparte. This is the story of the Siege of Malta, 1798 to 1800, when the island's people, with the support of the British Navy, resisted the French revolutionary forces for nearly 2 years. This is the story of the Siege of Malta, 1798 to 1800, where the island's people, aided by the British Navy, resisted the French revolutionary forces for nearly 2 years. Malta, perched strategically in the Mediterranean, became the stage for a dramatic clash of armies, politics, and faith. While Napoleon moved on to his Egyptian campaign, the island held firm, demonstrating how courage and local knowledge can challenge even the most powerful military. The siege was not just a battle, it was a test of human endurance, strategy, and survival under unimaginable conditions. The stakes were immense. Control of Malta meant dominance over Mediterranean trade routes and influence in European politics. For the Maltese, it was a fight for their homes, religion, and cultural identity. For the French, it was about securing a foothold for Napoleon's Egyptian ambitions. This conflict blended military strategy with human drama, setting the stage for extraordinary stories of heroism and ingenuity. By exploring the Siege of Malta, we uncover a tale of resilience, sacrifice, and the struggle of ordinary people against extraordinary odds. Before we dive into the battles, let's understand why Malta mattered so much and why Napoleon targeted it in the first place. Strategic importance of Malta. Malta's location in the central Mediterranean made it a prize for any naval power. Controlling the island meant controlling the sea lanes between Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. The Knights of St. John had fortified Malta over centuries, making it a near impenetrable stronghold with towering walls and elaborate fortresses. These fortifications would later play a critical role during the siege. Its harbors, especially Valletta, were perfect for naval operations, giving whoever controlled them a strategic edge. Beyond military significance, Malta had immense political and cultural importance. The island had a unique identity, blending European and Mediterranean traditions under the Knights' rule. For Napoleon, seizing Malta was also about securing a supply line for his Egyptian campaign and demonstrating French dominance in the region. Conversely, for the Maltese, the island represented more than territory. It was their home, their faith, and their heritage. This clash of ambitions set the stage for one of history's most dramatic sieges. The strategic importance of Malta also drew the attention of Britain, which understood that French control of the island could threaten Mediterranean trade and naval supremacy. The stage was set for an international struggle, with Malta caught at the center of European power politics. The battle that followed would combine military genius, local courage, and naval blockade in ways that continue to captivate historians today. French invasion and occupation. In June 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte arrived with his fleet, intent on seizing Malta before advancing to Egypt. The French forces quickly overwhelmed the Knights of St. John, capturing Valletta and key fortresses. The surrender was swift, but the French soon discovered that ruling Malta would be far more challenging than conquering it. Napoleon implemented sweeping reforms, confiscating church property, secularizing institutions, and abolishing privileges enjoyed by the local population. These measures, while intended to modernize governance, deeply alienated the Maltese. Local resentment grew rapidly as French soldiers took control of towns, monasteries, and churches. Religious and cultural alienation created a tinderbox of anger and resistance. Families, who once coexisted peacefully under the Knights' rule, now feared that their traditions, language, and faith were under attack. The Maltese quickly realized that surrendering to French authority meant losing more than just political autonomy. It meant losing their cultural identity. Despite the French garrison's military superiority, tensions made maintaining control difficult. Looting, administrative changes, and heavy-handed tactics only fueled anger among civilians. The situation escalated from dissatisfaction to organized resistance, signaling that the occupation would face significant challenges. In hindsight, the French underestimated the determination of a small but fiercely united population. Spark of rebellion. By September 1798, the Maltese had had enough. The rebellion erupted in the countryside and quickly spread to towns across the island. Ordinary civilians, farmers, artisans, and townspeople rose against the French occupiers. Armed with whatever they could find, they began harassing garrisons, cutting off supply routes, and occupying strategic positions. Religious leaders encouraged the uprising, framing it as a defense of faith and tradition. The early insurgent victories emboldened the population and inspired a sense of collective purpose. Maltese forces were able to isolate French troops in Valletta and other fortified positions. Guerrilla tactics, knowledge of local terrain, and sheer determination gave them an advantage despite lacking formal military training. The rebellion transformed from sporadic skirmishes into a formal siege. For the French, the uprising was unexpected and deeply frustrating. They were surrounded, outnumbered in the countryside, and facing constant harassment. The rebels' determination turned the occupation into a protracted struggle, forcing the French into a defensive posture. This was the beginning of one of the most extraordinary sieges in Mediterranean history. If you're fascinated by incredible stories of courage and strategy, like this video and subscribe. Share it with friends who love history. These are the untold tales that show how ordinary people can challenge the greatest generals. Siege, warfare, and strategy. The siege was a complex military operation combining conventional fortifications, guerrilla tactics, and naval blockades. French forces held Valletta, heavily fortified and difficult to assault directly. The Maltese, supported by British advisors and artillery, surrounded the French and cut off supply lines. Guerrilla attacks, ambushes, and clever use of terrain made it difficult for the French to move outside the city. This combination of traditional siege techniques and irregular warfare made the conflict unique. Both sides had to adapt to harsh conditions. French garrisons tried sorties to disrupt the rebels, while Maltese insurgents relied on ingenuity, improvising weapons, and building hidden fortifications. The British Navy maintained a tight blockade, bringing in supplies for the rebels and preventing French reinforcement. Communication, coordination, and logistics became critical factors in the drawn-out struggle. Ultimately, the siege became a test of endurance, strategy, and human will. While the French relied on superior firepower, the Maltese and British exploited local knowledge and tenacity. This blend of conventional and unconventional warfare provides lessons that military historians still study today. Life under siege. Civilians and soldiers' life during the siege was grueling for everyone involved. Civilians faced food shortages, disease, and constant fear of bombardments. French soldiers suffered similar hardships, trapped in fortified positions with dwindling supplies. Families relied on ingenuity to survive, hiding food, evacuating children, and creating makeshift shelters. The psychological toll was immense, with anxiety, hope, and despair shaping daily life. Despite hardships, stories of heroism and resilience abound. Women smuggled supplies to insurgents, children helped relay messages, and ordinary citizens risked their lives to sabotage French positions. For the French, leadership under siege conditions tested morale and discipline. Disease and starvation became as deadly as enemy fire. The siege became a human drama as much as a military conflict. Endurance, sacrifice, and courage defined life on both sides. For the Maltese, survival was intertwined with the defense of identity, faith, and homeland. Espionage, diplomacy, and international politics, the siege was not just fought with guns and cannons, it involved spies, diplomacy, and international intrigue. The British gathered intelligence on French movements and supplied the rebels strategically. European powers closely watched the conflict, aware that Malta's fate could shift Mediterranean balance of power. Diplomatic negotiations attempted to limit bloodshed, but ultimately failed as both sides held firm. The siege highlighted how intelligence and alliances could be as decisive as military strength. British involvement was crucial. Admiral Sir Alexander Ball coordinated supply lines, blockade operations, and support for Maltese insurgents. The British naval presence cut off French reinforcements, slowly starving the garrison into submission. Malta became a focal point of coalition strategy against revolutionary France. The intersection of military, diplomatic, and intelligence operations made the siege a model case for modern historians. It shows how small actors can leverage international support to resist much larger forces. The Siege of Malta was as much a battle of wits as it was of weapons. Key battles and turning points continued. Ultimately, the prolonged pressure left the French garrison isolated and vulnerable. Starvation, disease, and the relentless blockade weakened their ability to fight back effectively. The rebels, though lacking formal military training, demonstrated incredible resilience and tactical ingenuity. By late 1799, it was clear that the French position in Malta was untenable. The turning points of the siege exemplify how determination and local knowledge can overcome even a superior, well-equipped army. The psychological impact on the French soldiers was severe. Trapped behind walls with dwindling supplies and facing constant harassment, morale plummeted. Desertion and illness became rampant, and the garrison's leadership struggled to maintain order. Every failed sortie deepened the sense of desperation within Valletta. Meanwhile, the Maltese and their British allies gained confidence, emboldened by each French setback. These turning points made the eventual French surrender inevitable. The combination of blockade, insurgent attacks, and internal decay created a scenario from which there was no escape. The stage was set for the final chapter of the siege, where starvation and strategy would finally force the French to capitulate. Death toll and hardships, the human cost of the siege was staggering. Estimates suggest that thousands died from disease, starvation, and the ongoing skirmishes. Civilians faced malnutrition, epidemics, and the destruction of homes and farms. French soldiers, confined to fortified positions, suffered from similar privations. The prolonged conflict devastated communities across Malta. The psychological and social effects lasted long after the fighting ended. Families were torn apart, and many villages were left empty or partially destroyed. Survivors endured trauma, and the memories of loved ones lost to violence or famine. Stories of courage and perseverance, however, became part of Malta's cultural memory. The siege reshaped society, emphasizing resilience in the face of extreme adversity. The hardships also highlighted the role of women, children, and the elderly in sustaining the resistance. From smuggling supplies to relaying messages, civilians played an essential part in keeping the rebellion alive. Their contributions remind us that wars are not only fought by soldiers, but by entire communities. Surrender and immediate aftermath. By September 1800, the French garrison, weakened by starvation and disease, finally surrendered. The capitulation marked the end of a nearly 2-year-long siege. Malta came under British administration, signaling a new era for the island and the Mediterranean. The British quickly established order, repaired fortifications, and began integrating the island into their strategic plans. For the Maltese, the surrender was both a relief and a victory. The French defeat had far-reaching implications for Napoleon's Egyptian campaign. Without Malta as a secure base, his naval and supply operations faced limitation. The siege demonstrated that even a small, determined population could impede the ambitions of one of Europe's most formidable generals. It also reinforced the importance of local knowledge, alliances, and perseverance in warfare. The immediate aftermath saw celebrations among the Maltese, who honored their courage and survival. However, rebuilding and recovering from the siege's destruction would take years. Valletta and surrounding towns bore scars from bombardments and occupation, but the spirit of resistance endured. Legacy of the siege. The Siege of Malta left a profound legacy in military and cultural history. It showed that fortitude, local knowledge, and alliances could overcome even superior forces. Malta became a vital British stronghold, shaping the balance of power in the Mediterranean for decades. The courage of the Maltese insurgents entered national folklore, symbolizing resistance against oppression. Militarily, the siege influenced future naval and land operations. Historians study the use of blockades, guerrilla tactics, and combined arms strategies employed by the Maltese and their allies. It also highlighted the logistical challenges of sustaining garrisons and sieges, lessons valuable for modern military planning. Culturally, the siege strengthened Maltese identity. It reinforced the significance of language, religion, and local traditions in uniting a population against a foreign occupier. The story of ordinary people standing up to one of history's most famous generals continues to inspire today. Fun and Namp, fascinating facts. Did you know that Napoleon never stayed long in Malta after capturing it, leaving the French garrison to manage the occupation? Women and children played critical roles, from smuggling supplies to warning rebels of French movements. Secret tunnels and hidden weapons caches gave the Maltese a tactical edge against a more powerful army. Artifacts from the siege, including cannons, forts, and historic documents, still survive today. The siege even influenced naval engineering and blockade strategies in subsequent European conflicts. These intriguing details bring the siege to life, reminding us that history is not just about dates and battles, it's about people, ingenuity, and survival. The Siege of Malta was more than a military confrontation. It was a story of courage, strategy, and human resilience. Ordinary Maltese civilians, aided by British allies, managed to resist one of Europe's greatest military leaders. The siege reshaped the Mediterranean's political landscape and cemented Malta's place in history. History is full of these remarkable moments where small forces challenge great empires. The Siege of Malta reminds us that determination, strategy, and unity can alter the course of events. If you enjoyed this story of bravery and strategy, like, share, and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Comment below. If you were a Maltese civilian during the siege, how would you have survived? Let's keep history alive together.